Hello and welcome to CIA News Analysis, where we apply the info warrior mindset and worldview to the financial news. Thank you for your support. Alright guys, in our first article here, we see Civil-backed news site stores full article on Ethereum blockchain. A US news article has been stored in its entirety onto the Ethereum blockchain in what its writers claim is a world's first. Maria Bustillos, editor of journal-owned popular news site, announced Monday that she had archived the article originally published in Death and Tax magazine onto the Ethereum blockchain in full. Here we can see a little bit of a snapshot of the code and then the text of the article. And it goes on and she says, for the first time in human history, it might be possible to create absolute receipts. Absolute, unassailable, unchangeable, incorruptible records. That would make an enormous turning point if people were able to value this development at its true value. And I think as a journalist, what she's really trying to say here is that the Ethereum blockchain is protecting that information. And in today's world, where Facebook and Twitter and big giant tech that has a monopoly on social media, there's a censorship problem. People like Alex Jones and thousands of other libertarians and free-thinking individuals and conservatives have been silenced and suspended or completely banned from popular social media sites, even though those social media sites, specifically Twitter, have admitted that they are the 21st century public square. And by law, even if the public square is privately owned, citizens still have the right to practice free speech. Are they able to practice free speech in today's environment? Absolutely not. Facebook, Twitter, they shadow ban, they censor, they suspend, and they just completely digitally murder. With blockchain as a technology being able to store and keep immutable, unchangeable records, in the future, we're going to see news articles and people's opinions being protected by the blockchain so that no one entity, no matter how much power or money they have, can come in and take away that information or censor that information or opinion. So even though this article doesn't turn heads at first, I think that in the future, this is going to be a game changer when it comes to journalism and news. Well, in our next article, we see that the Wall Street Journal suggests quick sale repurchase of Bitcoin may lower taxes. Now, this is the problem with mainstream news. The Wall Street Journal is using this headline, and somebody in the world is going to read that headline, and unfortunately, they're going to say, oh, okay, yeah, that's a good idea. And they're going to say, you know, I'll sell my Bitcoin now, save money on taxes, and then I'll be able to buy twice as much at $1,500. So they're just planting this seed of capitulation, planting this seed that that's actually a good idea. And clearly it's not. Never sell your Bitcoin. Never. Never sell your Bitcoin. When it's time to sell your Bitcoin, you will be able to trade your Bitcoin directly for goods and services. That's when it's time to sell your Bitcoin. Not now to save money on taxes. And furthermore, the IRS considers Bitcoin property. So if you sold your house and bought it back real quick, if you're a long-term hodler, please tell me how that would help you. It wouldn't. This specifically applies to day traders, and yet they post it as if it applies to everybody like it's a good idea. This is the type of misleading headlines that we see in the mainstream news. The reason why CIA News exists today. In our next articles, we see United Arab Emirates will introduce ICO regulation in first half of 2019. Well, in our last couple episodes, we saw that the UAE exchange is actually doing tests with Ripple for cross-border payments and remittances. Well, now we see that a financial regulator of the United Arab Emirates will introduce initial coin offering regulations in the country by the end of the first half of next year. So we see that the UAE is going full speed ahead, and this is what they have to say. Our market is open. ICO registration and licensing is available for all kinds of companies from across the world. There is demand. We have already received a couple requests for the issuance of the crypto assets and tokens. So, what do we see here? Yesterday, 2 U.S. congressmen drafted a bill and submitted it. They want clarity on digital assets. A couple weeks ago, the UK financial regulatory body produced standards for crypto governance, backed is now waiting for the CFTC to approve their regulations that are institutionally approved by all the same institutions that trade billions of dollars on the ICE exchange platform. In our next article, pro-Bitcoin Ron Paul. Oh, he just got an honorable mention in the last episode. If you want to go hang out with Anthony Garcia and talk about how Bitcoin is literally worth nothing, you go right ahead. But I'm going to hang out with people like Ron Paul, Jeff Berwick, Peter Thiel. I think I will take a look at some of the real crypto news and somebody's opinion who might be worth just a little bit more than yours. Ron Paul. It's time to abolish Federal Reserve, embrace tax-free crypto. Well, this is one of the best articles that we've come across so far, now in our 12th episode of CIA News, and I think that this article truly deserves to be fully read. So here we go. Retired U.S. Congressman Ron Paul, a Bitcoin skeptic turned proponent, reiterated his calls to abolish the Federal Reserve shortly after it raised the baseline interest rate 0.25 percentage point to a range of 2.25% to 2.5%. This is the fourth time that the Federal Reserve, the central banking system of the United States, privately owned, raised interest rates in 2018. The move sparked renewed fears of a U.S. recession that could potentially trigger a global recession in 2019. Now, if you are in the stock market, you should read our special report, the Trump Bump Report. This report is the CIA outlook on the markets over the next 4 to 6 years. This report was recently updated on December 19th, and in the free version of the report, you can see everything that we have to write about it, of course, but the recommendations, that content is for CIA members only. Now, if you're interested in those recommendations, you are able to upgrade your service from being a supporter to being an agent, and being an agent will allow you access to the special report recommendations. But now back to the article. Ron Paul said the Federal Reserve should let the free market dictate interest rates instead of artificially manipulating them. Amen. The Fed has no idea what rates should be, Paul tweeted. The Fed manipulates prices, distorts the economy, and makes decisions by looking at the data of a distorted economy. Central planning produces a world of economic delusions. America needs to get back to reality. End the Fed. And here we see him with his book that he wrote, End the Fed. This is not the first time Ron Paul, the father of the current U.S. Senator Rand Paul, has called to abolish the Federal Reserve. As CCM reported in October 2018, Ron Paul trashed the Fed for manipulating interest rates, saying such artificial manipulations could actually cause a recession. This, in turn, could bring about the death of fiat currency. It is likely that the next Fed-created recession will come sooner rather than later, Paul said. This could be the major catastrophe that leads to the end of fiat currency. What a warning from the three-time presidential nominee, the congressman who spent his life in the belly of the beast. Paul said the only way to avoid a Fed-created recession is to let people use alternative currencies like Bitcoin and to exempt cryptocurrencies from taxes. Well, that's something that he's never going to convince the government of, to exempt cryptocurrencies from taxes. We know that they're going to be using the system so that they can tax even more transactions. Think about all the cash transactions that go untaxed right now. Well, one of the biggest selling points from the institutions to the government is, hey, with Bitcoin, you can track everything, aka you can tax everything. And that's one of the biggest selling points. So although I do agree with Dr. Ron Paul, I think that we'll have a hard time getting the government to feel that way. Paul said central banks constantly increase and decrease the money supply to control the economy by manipulating interest rates. He said the Federal Reserve's cyclical manipulation of interest rates creates an artificial cycle of economic booms and busts. And that's the cycle we were talking about earlier on how they compound their wealth. Now, I'm working on a special report called Cryptonomics, where I try to show you where the bankers who played a big part in financing blockchain technology, well, in Bitcoin specifically, they have coded their cycle into Bitcoin. See, everybody's waking up now, and they can point their finger at the central bank and say, you're the manipulator, you're the bad actor, it's your fault the currency's going to crash, it's your fault we're in a recession. You did this by your manipulating the system instead of let the market run free. Well, that's the inflationary system, and it's gone to the point where the dollar, well, when the dollar was first created, it was worth $1, and now the purchasing power of the dollar is all the way down to anywhere between 4 and 11 cents. The inflationary system is on its way out. And guess what? The deflationary system is on its way in. And Bitcoin has been coded to go through these very same cycles. They was talking about interest rates trying to fight inflation. Well, Bitcoin itself, the code itself, cuts inflation every halving. More in the report, but the cycles are there and the opportunity to compound your wealth is there as well. Like many in the crypto community, Ron Paul is a libertarian who opposes government intervention in the free market. The virtual currency community generally prefers the crypto ecosystem's decentralized and unregulated market. Paul said an economy that is not manipulated is better for society. Not only should we audit the Federal Reserve, we should get rid of it, he said. Until very recently, Ron Paul was a staunch advocate of the gold standard, who was critical of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very exciting, but Bitcoin investors don't have a long-term perspective, Paul said in December 2017. What is it going to be like in 10 years? Nobody knows. But we have a pretty good idea of where gold will be in a general sense. Well, Dr. Paul, I agree with you. And I would say that for those of us following along the headlines at CIA News, we have a pretty good idea of where blockchain as a technology is going to be in 10 years. And we have a very good idea as well as where blockchain as a currency is going to be 10 years in the future economy, the critical component of the future economy. Paul has since changed his outlook on crypto and now says he believes that Bitcoin and a gold-backed currency can coexist in a free society. So I think we see a little bit of this libertarian, utilitarian utopia dream coming out of Dr. Paul here. But at the same time, we see the experience and the depth of knowledge of a congressman who's been in the belly of a beast for his whole career, telling the American people, hey, we need to end the Fed. We need to get away from these fiat currencies. And if we don't, if we let them play with the numbers one more time, it might be the end of fiat currency, which is the end of the dollar as the global reserve currency. The reason the United States is an economic powerhouse, the reason that the United States is able to bounce back so strongly. If we take away the global reserve currency that is the petrodollar, it would not be good for Americans, but it may very well be good for the rest of the world and for the financial system. If you are here and you follow us and you live in the United States, pray for the USA, read the Trump Bump Report, pray for Trump, and pray that we see revival and repentance for our great country here in the United States of America. Thank you for joining us for CIA News Analysis, and thank you for your support.